President of Care Transformation and Innovation at HCA Healthcare, Dr. Michael Schlosser.
Hello, good morning, everyone. It's great to be up here. It's really exciting to be at an artificial intelligence conference. I, about 30 years ago, was in school as an engineer and really was excited about technology and AI. It was just burgeoning field at that time. And then I got into one of those phases, you go through phases as a teenager and decided I needed to be a doctor. And so, took a little detour for 25 years. But I'm glad that I'm finally back kind of where I started and in a room with so many amazing people doing so many amazing things with technology, and excited to share with you a little bit about how we're going to apply this, or we are applying this technology to healthcare delivery. So I think it was said really well this morning that we're, as CT&I, which is my team, Care Transformation and Innovation, we're building the solutions that our hospitals and operators need, not necessarily the ones that they're interested or think they want. But we're tackling some really huge problems in healthcare. And I wish that I could tell you that I had pulled these images from like an archive from the history of healthcare, and that what I was going to show you today looks like the videos that all the people who just came before me had. But unfortunately, these are pictures we've taken from our own hospitals here probably in the last year. And so, as was also mentioned this morning, healthcare is kind of behind. We're trying to catch up, and I think the Pallantier team has done an amazing job helping HCA Healthcare catch up using its technology, and AI is going to be the thing that leaps us forward. But this is where we're starting. We're starting with very manual processes. We have 90,000 nurses, 300,000 colleagues across HCA Healthcare, 185 hospitals. We have the privilege of caring for 36 million patients a year. And so it's a lot of people, and it's a lot of individualized processes and people doing things the way they've always done them in very manual ways. And so the challenge that we have is, how do we take that and how do we apply automation? How do we redesign processes to take advantage of technology? And so to do that, we've built a purpose-driven team, which we call Care Transformation and Innovation, that's multidisciplinary, that wakes up every day thinking just about this problem. How do we tackle some of the biggest rocks, the biggest challenges we can see in healthcare, and how do we go into our hospitals and do it with the bedside caregivers? And our Pallantier team has been amazing in that they've joined us on those journeys. The engineer has been in the hospital sitting at the nurse's station, at the elbow with the caregivers, so we can really understand their world and their problems, because they hang on to what you're seeing on the screen, not because they're just stubborn or because they don't like technology, but because they have people's lives at stake and they've figured out a way to do it. I had a nurse leader once tell me, yes, this is all a mess, but it's my mess, and I know where to find everything. And so when we go in there and we're going to disrupt all of that, we have to do it with them, and we have to design those solutions in a way that they're willing to take advantage of it. So the phase one of this was tackling staffing and scheduling. So how we staff our units, how we decide which caregivers are going to take care of which patients on which unit every given day is a huge problem, and it has an enormous amount of variation. And so over the last several months, we've built a solution, we call it Timpani, that can automate that process. We take in all of the data, and I think, oh no, it's on the next slide, but we take in all the data that describes that entire problem, describes the nurses and the other caregivers and their preferences and how they like to work, and a whole bunch of other data predicting what the demand is going to be on that unit, the cost of various different decisions we can make. And it builds an automated schedule that tries to balance all of the needs of all the different people involved. The patient, of course, importantly, but the entire care team, the hospital, even the CFOs, we try to make them happy as well, and build a schedule for every single unit that can meet all of those changes. So we've deployed that solution, and my colleagues Ben and Kanan spoke at the first AIPCon a number of months ago about that solution. At that time, it was in 4 facilities, about 50 departments. Since then, we've been able to scale to 9 facilities, 150 departments, and it's building better schedules, in particular when the people can get out of its way, when they can give it the data that it needs and have that data be accurate, and then take the advice from the automated system and actually use those balanced schedules that it builds, we get really good results. And we see that the nurses are getting their preferences. We have the right care team members to take care of the right patients at the right time. Our goal for next year is to scale this to 400 departments, 40 facilities, hopefully in the first half of the year. We've set a target date there of May 2024. We'll see if we can make that target date. Just like everyone, the ontology is critical to this process. This clearly is not the entire data ontology. This is a piece of how we represent this problem in data. But that was one of the first big challenges, was how do we represent this entire problem inside a data ontology? And so again, I think Alex kind of described it well. This is a lot of hard work. It's not necessarily a lot of fun, but once you've built it and you have the problem represented in this way, it's pretty cool the things that you can do with it. So that first stage of this problem, building that better schedule, I think we've done pretty well inside our product. The second phase is what happens when reality occurs. And we've built a great plan, but the plan sort of meets reality and things change. And now we have to manually update that schedule or manage that schedule over time. And that's a solution that we call intelligent staffing. And then I also want to talk a little bit about another offshoot of this entire process that AIP has allowed us to create, which is called Bedside Shift Report. So this is a view of our product, Timpani, and this is the scheduling view, right? So we've built a schedule here now, and I know there's a lot of small numbers here on the screen, but the bottom is the schedule, and it's all the different team members and then the various shifts that they're scheduled into, and the colors represent whether we're scheduling them on a date that they asked us to schedule them or they preferred to be scheduled or not. And then across the top, you see all the details of how well we're balanced. How well is the schedule that we built, and we do these 30, 45 days in advance, matching the demand that we predict is going to be there, that we predict using a machine learning algorithm. And this looks like a fairly balanced schedule at this point, but then as I said, reality is going to happen, right? There's going to be a COVID outbreak and a daycare is going to close, or there's going to be increased demand because flu season occurred earlier than we expected to, and then we're going to get out of balance. And so how do we tackle that problem? Well, the rules-based engine is pretty good at tackling it unit at a time. Like it can kind of look through an individual unit and say, well, there's an extra nurse on this unit that hasn't filled all of their shifts yet, and so we can use that person to fill in. And so we started with a rules-based algorithm to try to figure out how to fill those holes. But when you get to multiple units or an entire hospital level or even entire market level, it gets really complicated really fast. And so the timing here was terrific because as we were beginning to tackle that problem, AIP came along, and now we have a tool that's really capable of managing those kinds of problems in real time. And so this is a view of the AIP assistant that is looking at the entire schedule for an entire hospital, and it's continuously monitoring for these problems. And so again, you see across the top the balance between supply and demand, if you will, of nurses and patients that we predict are going to come. And we've, in this example, run into a problem, or we're about to run into a problem, where the demand is going to get shifted, and we're not going to have the right nurses on the unit to take care of those patients. So here you can see sort of its baseline state, where it's reviewing on a constant basis those forecasts and the schedules, and making recommendations about what changes we might want to make in order to maintain our balance or to improve the balance. So now we're going to fast forward here, and we're going to inject some variation into what's going to happen. And in this example, we're going to see, and this, again, this is just a sort of a made-up example, but we're going to see we have a new patient scheduled for bariatric surgery, probably added to the schedule somewhat last minute, and now we don't have the right balance on a unit to take care of that patient. In this example, we're saying we don't have the right proficiency of one of the nurses to handle that specific type of patient. So the AIP has noticed that that's a problem, and it's making a recommendation. It's saying, hey, there's a nurse on another unit who has that proficiency. We can float them over. And so it's going to go ahead and follow that recommendation. But then as it floats them over, there's some consequences, right? A few dominoes that are going to fall here. And now we was recommending to staff up on that unit. You can see that on the far left-hand side. But now with this move that we've made, we don't need that anymore. We have actually more than enough nurses on that unit, and so we don't need to make that recommendation. And so it's taking that recommendation away and moving forward with floating that nurse from another unit. And then what the system actually can do is notify these nurses directly on its own. And so it can send a text message, oops, it just jumped forward there, directly to the nurse saying, hey, would you be willing to switch from Tuesday to Thursday? The nurse can reply to the system and say, yes, I can switch, and then it can go in and make that recommended change. Now, we've set it with rules so that if the change that it's recommending it make is something outside of our boundaries, like it's going to create overtime or it's recommending using contract labor, we can put in a human-in-the-loop stop there where the nurse leader has to review that change before the system can go ahead and send the text message and make the recommendation. But we are going down this path of automation because this is not part of our nurse leader's current workflow. If I back up to how does this occur today? Well, it doesn't, right? We build a schedule, and then probably 4:30 in the morning before a 7 a.m. shift, the nurse leaders are looking at who are the patients I have today and who are the nurses I have, and then they're trying to figure it out. They're like, oh, we're 3 nurses short on this unit. We're going to float someone over from that unit. It's going to make them short, but it's the best we can do. So this was not a process that they were engaged in, looking 3 days ahead, 7 days ahead. And we tried to do that manually and say, let's have the nurse leaders go in and interact with the rules-based system, but we're then adding workflow and we're adding steps to their process. And so in the end, an AIP agent that can do what we would be asking the nurse leaders to do, be constantly surveying the schedule. In fact, it can do it much better because, of course, our nurse leaders would never have time to constantly survey the schedule, can be constantly looking for these opportunities, constantly figuring out where are the best moves that we can make, actually make those moves, send those text messages and get agreement from the nurses and keep the schedule consistently balanced. And then what it's showing you on the right-hand side of the screen there is the ability to have an audit trail where we can go back in and we can see exactly why did it make the recommendations that it's making, what were the reasons, how does it improve the balance of the schedule, because we know that transparency and auditability are critical, especially in the healthcare space, especially if we're going to be giving an AI the ability to take some of these actions on its own. We've got to be able to make sure that we can go back and see why it did it. And then, of course, that will also give us the opportunity to give more feedback to the system so that we can understand if it's making changes or recommending changes that we don't think or the nurse leaders don't think are the right ones. We can go in and provide that feedback and correct it. So I'm quickly going to pivot to the bedside shift report. And so I mentioned this was sort of an offshoot of this process. So through that day of assignment process where we're figuring out which nurses need to take care of which patients, we have something that occurs that is called shift handoff. So you'll have entire new shift of nurses coming in. They've got to get the handoff from the outgoing shift, and they've got to, in a very short period of time, figure out who are these 6 patients that I need to take care of, what's going on with them, what do I need to be worried about, and how do I manage them that day? And it could be a patient they've never taken care of before. So once again, this is not from a historical record. This is, I know this looks very 2023 to you all, but this is how we currently do it today, which is a manual process. The nurses are taking notes, they're collecting this data throughout the entire day, and then using a tool like this one to hand off, which is highly variable, but it's also a ton of data that we're losing, right? This is all gone when they throw this piece of paper away. So what the Palantir team has helped us build, with a lot of help of my clinical operations team, many of which are in the room here today, is an automated shift handoff tool powered by AIP, where the AI is being given access to an ontology that describes a patient in the medical record, so the nurse's notes, the physician notes, the laboratory values, new imaging results that may have come back. And we've taught the AIP that ontology and what all that means, and now it's able to understand that. And then through prompts we give it where we say basically, hey, you're a helpful agent who's building a bedside shift report, it's able to create this view for our nurses that shows them all of the patients they're taking care of. And I'm going to advance here. And then it can go in and show them, here's the demographic information that you might be interested in. It's going to click here to another screen in a second, and it's going to show a timeline. And so this is something that would have taken the nurses a long time to create manually, but this is a history of what happened to that patient over the last 12 hours or 24 hours. You can see it's going in and highlighting some key information that the oncoming nurse is probably going to want to know as they take over care for this patient. We have in there the vital signs. You can see they're highlighting what the blood pressure is, which is normal. It's got lab values, including highlighting the ones that are abnormal. The nurses told us that's critical. You need to bring the most important information sort of up to the top and have it be readily available and highly visible. And all of this was done through just a number of prompts, training this AIP on what the data is and what the nurses need to know in terms of developing a bedside shift report. So we'll go back here to the timeline, and then what it's going to show you here is back to that idea of transparency and audibility, in that anytime we're doing something like this with an AI in healthcare, we need to make sure that there are no hallucinations, that there's nothing that's kind of not consistent with what's in the medical record. Obviously, we got patients' lives at stake again, as I mentioned. And so the ability to have the tool show us exactly where it found the information. Like if I say this medication was changed, here's where it is in the official electronic health record, and be able to click in live in the tool and show that that's the case is critically important. The other thing it's showing you right here is some of the live interface where the nurses can actually ask it to edit the report and say, in this timeline, I want to know more about the medications. And so the AI then goes back in and it adjusts the timeline to show more details on the medications. And then you can see it's showing you the click through to the source information where we can show exactly where that information came from. The last thing that's really critically important in these types of use cases is QA. So this is a process that will occur tens of thousands of times across our hospitals in any individual given day. And so in addition to the nurses being able to sort of audit and click through and be sure that the report that's being created is accurate, we need an automated system, a QA process, that we can make sure that we don't have model drift or changes or hallucinations. And so we've been very thoughtful with the Palantir team around how are all the different ways using, in some cases, AIP to test, or AIP or NLP to perform checks, that we can have an ongoing process of auditing and QA available. So just to finish up, we started with staffing and scheduling. We've now scheduled over 100,000 shifts, approximately 6,000 hours of time saved on the nurse leaders. That led us into the concept of intelligent staffing, where we can balance shifts more accurately, but also close that loop and make the changes in real time. And then that opened up the possibilities of what else can this AIP system do to support our nurses in their workflow, which took us down this pathway of bedside shift report, where we can take another manual process, highly variable, highly important and risky part of care delivery, and apply technology and automation to help them do their job better, do it safer, and continue to return our nurses to the bedside so they can focus on taking care of patients. So with that, I'll finish. Apologize, I ran a couple minutes over there, but just a lot of really exciting work that I was excited to share with you all today, and look forward to interacting with you all for the rest of the conference. So thank you.
One more round of applause for our morning speakers, demoers, presenters, customers. All right, we've got a lot more cooking for you. As you know, we've got a very, very busy afternoon. Hope everyone's ready to be hands-on keyboard. My phone battery is dying from the number of people on the live stream that are signing up for boot camps, which is very exciting. So we're excited to have you guys working later this afternoon. A lot more stories to share. And let's get to lunch.
This morning's programming has concluded. Please proceed to 100 Hamilton for lunch and demos.